Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Transparently, we're starting like due diligence with a venture firm this week.
Okay.
So it basically means they just like look at all our shit and like are like, do we want to give you money or not? And we're just trying to get all our shit together.
Yeah, I appreciate you even taking the time to do this then. That sounds
yeah, dude. Well, I'm definitely stoked to be here, you know?
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. You are the first, for anyone who's listening, the first person I've had on the show that I haven't met in person. I haven't known everybody like super well at all. Some people I've known from growing up and they just ended up doing some cool things. But a lot of people I've kind of gotten to know in the last year or so, just working on projects or something. But you're the first one I've met through network, you can say, online through LinkedIn. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
And you are a very interesting person, is what I've seen already, just from the few things I have been able to see. So I'm really excited for this.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. So I'm stoked that you found me, and I'm stoked that the ethos brought us together.
Yeah. So let's get into it, man. We got an hour here.
Yeah.
Sleeping outside.
Yeah. So yes, I do sleep outside. It seems that you've gathered that. I should send you over a photo, and maybe you could attach it to the podcast.
Yeah, I might be able to plug it in.
Yeah. So I sleep in my backyard. So I live in a residential neighborhood here in Seattle, and in a neighborhood that's referred to as, it's like Capitol Hill or Central District. We're right on the edge.
Okay.
And it actually started maybe like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago now, where I was doing this thing where every 30 days I would just like try a different like lifestyle change. It was originally dieting. And then for 1 month I was like, I'm going to go sleep in our backyard. And it was in the summer, and it was like, sweet, it's not going to rain. Ended up being like the rainiest August on record in Seattle, and I got crushed, but it was still pretty fun. And I subletted out my room, which is now
really?
Forij HQ. Yeah, I subletted it out, and actually the guy ended up staying for 2 months, and like weather got nice, and so I ended up sleeping outside for 2 months, and I loved it. And then when I started my business, Forij, we were bringing on interns, and we were expanding and needed space. So it made sense to me. I was like, great, I'll just move back outside. Like, I've done it before. And so I got rid of my bed, moved in some desks, brought in some interns, and then I originally just had my tent in the backyard, and didn't even think about how long I could potentially be out there. It was just like, this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And then next thing I know, it's been a year now. So I've been sleeping in my backyard for a year, and I have like a pretty legit setup. I would say a lot of people are pleasantly surprised when they actually see it and are like, oh, like, I thought you slept in something way worse than this. And I've actually built some infrastructure around it. So I've like built a platform. So, I have like cement bricks, and I have like a wood platform. So I'm like 8 inches off the ground. And then I have like a bungee board, which is like a slotted board. It gives me like 2 inches elevation. And then I have a condensation mat. I've got some tiling, and then I have 5 inches of memory foam. So I'm chilling.
Yeah. So at least you're off the ground. It's not like straight up tent right to the wet ground.
Yeah. And I have like a 10 by 10 canopy over me. So like, when it snowed, it was fine. When it rains, it's fine. It's actually the wind that is annoying, because it can be really loud.
Yeah.
So it's more about like the noise level, but it's awesome, man. I love it out there.
So nothing has shook you, or like you haven't had a bad night where it was a big storm or anything just collapsed?
I can't say that. We've had a couple of collapses and iterations on building my structure.
Yeah.
I have been collapsed on 3 times by like a canopy up top. And you got to get up, and it's like pouring rain. It's like 4 in the morning, and it's cold, and you just got to like deal with it. And then some nights I'll have to like clear the top if like, when snow is piling on, so it doesn't collapse on me. And then interestingly enough, I like have done a lot of lucid dreaming out there. And
like on purpose?
I don't know what it is. I think maybe I just fall into deeper sleep, but I've also found that sometimes I'll shift into sleep paralysis. Do you know what that is?
Is that where you feel a negative energy? It's like a bad experience?
They often are bad experiences,
'Cause-
but essentially like you like find yourself where like your brain kind of wakes up, but you can't control your body. So your mind's active, but you're trying to like move and you can't, like, you have no access or
Yeah.
control to your body. So you frequently panic and you often hallucinate. And so I've had some like sleep paralysis sort of like nightmares where like somebody's coming into the tent and I like
Yep.
can like see them there and I can't move and it's terrifying.
I've had that happen actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is terrifying. I had that happen once in a really old hotel. Do you know
Okay.
Duluth in Minnesota, Duluth?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so I was up there staying, I think it was to watch my sister dance or something. Honestly, I forget what it was, but yeah, that was the first time it ever happened to me. I was completely paralyzed and it felt like a demon or like a negative spirit
Yeah.
was like approaching me and I could not move my body at all. And it
Damn,
was
dude. Yeah, it's scary.
so you've had that happen. Just it's in your backyard, right? You said?
Yeah, it's in my backyard. So yeah, man, it's good though. I would recommend to everybody. And for those of you that are listening that know Rich Roll, he's another podcast host. He sleeps outside full time. So
Rich Roll?
I'd recommend. Yeah.
I'll have to look him up.
Yeah.
He has his own show. He sleeps outside. What's with the lucid dreaming though? Why do you think that is?
That I don't know. Well, I take melatonin every night, so I think like if you just go into a deep sleep, like you have a better chance of lucid dreaming, from what I understand. But I don't know. I'm not totally sure.
And do you mean you're like hallucinating with that? Because my understanding of lucid dreaming is like you can control. You're aware you're dreaming, so you can control it, but you're not. You don't wake up. Is that what you're thinking?
Right. Yeah, it's sort of like correct. Like you recognize you're in a dream, which like inherently allows you to have some sort of like control, or like, it's a little bit of like choose your own adventure, but also like you will remember a lot more of your dream. And it just feels a lot more real. So I don't know. I'm not exactly sure why it happens. But I'm stoked on it. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, I remember reading about that in high school and trying to do it. Because I remember reading that if you could just lay still, it was like 20 minutes or something. If you could just lay still and completely not move, it'll trick your body into like thinking it's asleep, but your mind will obviously still be awake, and your brain will even send signals out to parts of your body to like itch it or scratch it, and you have to like completely ignore those because then it'll recognize like, oh, I'm still awake. So I remember trying to do it a couple of times, and one time I thought it was about to happen, but like the surprise of it woke me up or like got me out of it.
Yeah.
That's
funny. Yeah, I remember reading something about like you like cut a ping pong ball in half and like put them over your eyes or some shit. I don't know. I never ended up going through with that, but
that's funny. I read the same thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
So sleeping outside, man. I just got a couple questions I wrote down here for you because I just want to be prepared. I knew we have a little bit less time than normal, but completely enough time. So don't feel like
cool.
I'm thinking it's not. But so you like that? Do you like that better than sleeping inside? Like, do you think you're going to do this long term?
I don't know. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to renew my like lease at my place and stay outside, or like go and move somewhere else and like move back in. But I'll like visit my parents or something or go elsewhere, and I prefer to sleep outside now. It's definitely a preference. There's something about it being cold. So I don't know. I'd love to figure out a solution to sleep outside in the long term, but at some point, and everybody tells me this of like, you're like meet a girl and then you'll stop sleeping outside. And
yeah, that's what I was gonna ask next. What if you had that situation?
Had visitors?
Yeah.
No. Rule number one I refer to my structure outside as the pavilion, and the pavilion is my solitary abode. So no guests allowed. So no one has spent the night. No.
Yeah, on purpose, right?
On purpose, correct.
Yeah, I feel like that would be an interesting situation.
Yeah, I'm waiting for like an animal to kind of pop through, but still haven't seen animals either.
Nothing?
Mm-mm.
Did you have animals in the neighborhood that you know of?
Oh yeah, I'll see like raccoons outside sometimes when I like go out to bed. Like I'm like leave the house and then I'll like see them, or like there are large rats or squirrels and stuff. But
yeah,
They know the line. They know they know the territory turf
Yeah.
and whatnot. So they don't come.
You've given the signal, the
Exactly.
nature signal that this is my space.
Precisely.
But all right, man. So let's get into Forij, right? That's what it's called.
Yeah,
Your
that's
business.
it.
Tell me about Forij, man. So, because I've seen obviously probably the bare minimum. I know it's mushrooms,
Mhm.
and I know you're doing granola with it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So I'll maybe give a little backdrop and just how we found ourselves here. So I mentioned earlier that I was doing some of this like dieting or just like switching things up every 30 days. So I did it for about 18 months, and I don't know why I did it. I'm sure I could talk to a therapist one day of like what I was trying to prove to myself or something. But I think for me, it was right after I graduated college and I had like a corporate job and I felt very constricted.
yeah,
So I think for me, it was like an expression of myself,
Mhm.
of like, I'm going to do things differently because I can. And basically, towards the end of that, I was looking for kind of a broader challenge and ended up signing up for half Ironman. It was like, training could be really fun, and it got really into like fitness. But over the 18 months, like the vast majority of them were really food related, supplement related. Some of them were like meditation or sleep related, but really what I found was that from like a dieting or like nutrition standpoint, like, I found that sort of my body and really like energy, like mood and sleep were best when I was eating like whole food ingredients. And I really liked the effects that like functional mushrooms had as well. And so those were definitely two of the keys. And the last thing I noticed from doing a lot of the dieting was, like you could go and do keto for 30 days or be vegan or Whole30 for 30 days. But if you don't actually like what you're eating or like things taste good, like it's really hard to stick with over time. So for me, it was like, or like I started to sort of believe in these three keys of like eating whole food ingredients, supplementing with functional mushrooms, and eating food that you actually like, that like tastes good, in order to sustain that sort of nutrition portfolio, if you will. So from there, yeah, I was was really getting into functional mushrooms and was starting to train. And so I started to, I wanted to kind of like optimize my meals for nutrition. And so I started creating this like oatmeal where I would put, essentially dried mushroom powder. So functional mushrooms, right? Like lion's mane, chaga, reishi, cordyceps. Those are the names of some. Turkey tail. You're starting to see products crop up all over the market. A lot of like mushroom coffees. And basically, I was taking those dried mushroom powders and putting them in my oatmeal with like seeds and nuts. And then that sort of transformed into a granola. And then, next thing I know, I'm bringing that into work and letting people try it. And I'm running blind taste tests at the gym. In between sets, I would bring like our granola and other granolas and see what people would think. And, for me, it was partially just for fun. Like it was exciting that like, yeah, I was making something and people liked it, but also, I was looking for something that had functional mushrooms in it that I could just like eat or like seamlessly kind of work into my like daily habits. So, I went through a lot of like the mushroom coffees and teas and just like, I like coffee and I didn't like kind of like, they all sort of tasted a little groundy or like earthy.
Yep.
So I was looking for sort of a seamless way to include functional mushrooms into sort of this like whole food dieting approach that I had developed. So that was really like the genesis, and was kind of kicking it around, wasn't really, just kind of just messing around with it. And then I went to a startup conference with a friend out in San Francisco, like HustleCon, and it was really just to see my friend. Like we went out and he was like, hey, I really want to go to this, will you come? And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. We went out and like you're networking, and this is before COVID, and everyone's like, oh, like what's your thing? Like what's your idea, or like your business, or like what are you trying to do? And so I basically like fabricated to a degree. It was like, oh, I'm making like the first like functional mushroom like food focused product, like that allows like anybody to basically start trying or supplementing with functional mushrooms without tasting it at all. And a lot of people were like, oh, I have no idea what that is. Or like some people were like, oh, that sounds cool. And then there were a couple, angel investors in particular that were like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Like I'm really into mushrooms. I think there's a big opportunity there. So based off of that, one of them was like, send me your pitch deck. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll send it to you like next week. And then so I went back and like built a logo, like
Yeah.
hired a freelancer to like build a logo and like put together some sort of like deck. And then yeah, and then it sort of just spiraled out of control from there. So yeah, so today we have a granola product that it's whole food ingredients, functional mushroom extracts. But in theory, and really what we want to do is like we want to create foods that really align with those three values that I highlighted, right? Whole food ingredients with like added benefits, health benefits from functional mushroom extracts. So think like natural energy, like mental focus, and really like immune support. Those are the big three that we focus on. And then something that like tastes good. So today it's granola, but like who knows? Like tomorrow it could be like crackers or like butters or like anything really. It's really just aligning to sort of those three values, and really just trying to help people, have better energy, sleep better, and really just have more control over their mood from a day-to-day basis.
So is it just a powder? Are you creating a powder and then just like mixing it into these already foods, or with the granola, is it actual chunks of mushroom that's in the granola? Like how is it
Yeah.
being integrated into the food?
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people ask that, and it's the initial point of confusion of like, so we definitely don't use like mushrooms, like actual chunks of mushrooms. Rather,
Okay.
we use functional mushroom extracts or mushroom extracts. So think of like a CBD extract.
Yeah.
Like you'll see it come in like a tincture format or like an oil. That is what we're essentially mixing into our product. And so what that allows us to do is to take really like hyper concentrated doses and add them into our products. And so like you really can't taste them. And so they're basically like really fine powders, or like liquid extracts. So no, there are no like chunks of mushrooms or anything, and you really would have like no idea that they're in there.
Yeah. That's really interesting. 'Cause with the granola, yeah, I was definitely thinking that there would be chunks of mushrooms, but just going off of what you just said in crackers or other foods, then yeah, I was imagining it had to be a
Mm-hmm.
powder or something. So it's an oil basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
So yeah,
is that going forward kind of the what it's always going to be, you think, oil?
we'll see. I mean, I think there's a lot of science going on in the space. So I think as different formats develop of how they're actually extracting a lot of these like phytonutrients and antioxidants and vitamins and minerals from these mushrooms, like we'll continue to keep to keep an eye on the market and how that's developing. So for now, I think it makes a lot of sense. It allows us to include these substances that have these benefits without impacting like the flavor profile.
Yeah.
But that may evolve over time. So who knows? We'll just have to kind of see.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Like, especially for me, because I don't know anything about this
Yeah.
industry or this
Do you
market.
do you do any like supplementing or any supplementation or kind of things you believe in outside of just like eating food?
Yeah. I mean, I've been really big into fitness since I grew up playing sports and then stopped playing sports in college, and which just kind of then reverted to just working out, and that kind of became my sport. So I was big into the typical protein I would take a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on and off have been creatine. I haven't taken it for a while now, but I would take that for months at a time. Multivitamins, greens, which there's more in there than I can even remember, because I was working with a nutrition company at one point, kind of trying to be an ambassador and grow per se. It's something that I would have been able to make money off of, almost like a salesman, but they're actually really good products, I think. First
Which
form.
are you talking about? Athletic greens, or is there?
Yeah, it would have been like, I forget now, honestly. I mean, I'm sure like kale was in there, spinach was probably in there,
Mm-hmm.
kind of all that stuff. And they just made a powder and called it greens.
Cool.
And then you just put that in water. Yeah, it didn't taste the best, but it did make me feel good. Even
Yeah.
after I was in college when I was doing that. So even after a night of drinking, I would drink that in the morning. And even if it was a short term, just like an hour or so, it would make me feel better. So I liked it a lot. But
Cool.
yeah, that's kind of the extent of it. So I don't even do it
Cool.
as much anymore. Like I haven't even been taking protein for a while. But
As it goes, yeah. And everybody's got their journey through, looking for different things that work best for their body, right?
mhm,
And again, like that was a big discovery for me when I went through a lot of that dieting. Is like you should just go through the process yourself. Like I recommend it to a lot of friends. It's, it's not the easiest, but you just do it, by every 30 days. You don't have to commit to 18 months or 12 months or anything. It's, I found typically it took about 18 days to see like a change in how like I was feeling or I was sleeping or, how my body was reacting to a different diet. Typically the first like week is pretty like weird because your body's trying to like figure out what's going on when you change your eating habits, and then it starts to adjust. So, but I think it's super valuable. And I think a lot of people would find, it's like, oh, I've got, my skin isn't the best, or, I don't really sleep super well. It's like, I think if you start with nutrition, it's a good place to start.
And so what were you changing exactly? Would you just add a vitamin here or there, or would you eat more, carbs? Would you eat more protein or less, or time of day you're eating? What were you?
Yeah. So like, for example, like 1 month I just went gluten-free.
Really?
So like everything I was eating, like I wasn't eating any gluten. Like another month, like I went on the Whole30 diet. So that's like a very super rigid diet. Like I went paleo, I went keto. Like another month, I gave up basically like caffeinated substances, and I only went with functional mushrooms. And that was sort of where I started to like see the good effects of those. And then I kind of just kept consuming those over time.
Okay.
Really liked those. Like I went strictly vegetarian. There's like an anti-inflammation diet that I tried. A whole slew of others. Like one month I even just like meditated every day. It was just like, all right, I'm just going to meditate every day. Another month I went through and I performed like cold exposure every day. If you
like
know
a cold
that
bath?
Is. Kind of, yeah. I would do it like in the lake in the winter.
Yeah.
So you just go in and it's like, all right, like 3 minutes in the lake every day. So different things like that, where it's like, all right, let's see how this affects and sort of monitor like overall well-being, mood, happiness, sleep, energy.
That's so interesting. And were you into that before this, or did your kind of corporate job spark this interest of let me just kind of mess with myself? Or like growing up, were you into things along with fitness or nutrition or?
Not so much, I always grew up like playing sports and whatnot, but I never like felt like I was in like a place where I could completely control like what I was consuming, like both either financially or just like, on my own. Like when I was growing up with my family, it was like whatever they were eating. And then when I was in college, like I mostly ate in our fraternity house, and that was just like, well, whatever is available. I was poor. And so this was like, all right, like I could go Whole30 and like spend a lot more on food because I'm, I have the means to. So I would totally recommend it though.
Yeah, I've heard of do you know, I'm sure you know because he's from, I think, the Seattle area, Jordan Peterson?
I don't. Who's that?
Jordan Peterson. He's been, I believe he's a psychology professor, but I've got to know him from Joe Rogan's podcast. And then I think he honestly has his own podcast now with his daughter, and he's been on a bunch of other ones. And I believe his real job actually is a psychology professor, but I've seen him at times talk about, because I think he has, him and his daughter, I think, have autoimmune disease. And I'm very unfamiliar with these topics, but I think because of those things, he has spoken about going through kind of what you're saying, like messing with different foods to see how they affect their bodies. And his daughter found that a completely 100% meat diet, it might only be red meat too, like made her the best. So he eventually, I think, transitioned to that himself. So that's just kind of what I'm going to right now, thinking about is things that he's talked about on there, like just how these foods affect their body, and how it's weird how, you wouldn't think an all meat diet would make you the healthiest maybe, and like completely cutting out vegetables and all that stuff. And for them, it worked, I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like common knowledge or like Western medicine would be like, that's a bad idea. Don't do that. However, yeah, it's like everybody's kind of different, and yeah, like they have autoimmune diseases. And yeah, I think a lot of people would probably, maybe have heard of the elimination diet, where like, yeah, you start and then you just like stick with your diet, and then you're like eliminating something for X amount of days. So it allows you to see like, okay, when I'm not eating dairy, like what specifically is the difference that I'm feeling?
That might have been what they did, yeah. And then she eliminated it all the way down to just beef.
Could have been. That'd be kind of a boring diet, but that's good for her. I'm like,
yeah,
she found it. What worked?
Yeah, and it just sounds Very interesting. I honestly, it's inspired me right now. I might start doing this stuff because I love food. I eat basically everything at this point. I wasn't like that growing up, but now I basically eat all vegetables, all meats. But I've never, yeah, messed with it myself like that, trying to figure out what is, this do to me or that do to me.
Yeah,
Um,
just a thought, you know.
I- yeah, I think it's legit too. I really do. I think diet is huge. And I know that just from fitness in general, like just the amount of food you're eating, messing with your calorie or your carbs versus your proteins or fats and things like that, it
Hmm.
make a big difference in a lot of people. Um,
Yeah.
Often more than even their workouts. But so I definitely believe in it. You kind of mentioned there, Western medicine. Do you find that the things you're talking about goes against any like Western medicine mythology, or I don't know how
Yeah.
you say that exactly, but like against the grain, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if it goes against the grain per se, but it probably doesn't like, perfectly align. So, like you'll talk with a lot of people who have, there's a lot of people who strongly believe in the use of basically mushrooms medicinally. So
Yeah.
like to like cure them of like colds, or I've even heard of like, like you go into like the psychedelic range, and we're not talking about psychedelic mushrooms in our products or anything, but
Hmm.
people who will, go through psychedelic trips and find that like it's cured their autoimmune diseases. Like I've chatted with people who have claimed that and believe in
Really?
it. And I don't necessarily not believe in it, but it just seems outlandish because everything you've been taught is like that just is impossible.
Yeah.
But a common thing I hear, and I like kind of believe in at this point because it's happened to me over time, is people who say like, hey, I like consume mushrooms every day, and in particular like mushrooms from the category that's referred to as like functional mushrooms. And so it's these mushrooms that really have like an added benefit, like the lion's mane or chaga or cordyceps or turkey tail, right? And maybe I'll just pause and actually take a step back of like, I think a lot of people think mushrooms are sort of this like black and white scale. You have like portobello and like white button mushrooms that you'd get like on your meal, or like you you know make at home for food, and then you have like
Yeah.
psychedelic mushrooms, and those are like completely different. The reality is like it's more of like a spectrum. So like on one end, yeah, you have like white button mushrooms or portobello mushrooms, things you buy in the grocery store. On the other hand, you have like mushrooms that kill you, and like psychedelic mushrooms that are like wild.
Yeah.
And then in the middle, there's sort of these, what I refer to, and I think what, is a common category, is it's like functional mushrooms. So it's these mushrooms that have an added benefit, right? Like, really, are giving you like natural energy, or like, a lot, almost act as more of like, yeah, like a mental focus supplement, or like boosting your immune system. And so I think of them almost in the same realm as like a CBD, right? Like how does like a CBD affect your body? Like it isn't like you're eating a CBD or consuming CBD for its nutritional value. Like no, there's an added functional benefit. With that said, a lot of these mushrooms also taste really good and also have like nutritional content that's awesome. Like think really, really good, protein and fats and carbs. So with that said, a lot of people claimed, and this is before I really started supplementing over a long period of time, is that like when they started supplementing with functional mushrooms, they stopped getting sick.
Really?
Like they're like, I haven't been sick in years. And I've like, since I've started down this journey, I haven't been sick in, I don't know, 20 months maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And typically before that, like I was typically getting sick, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 times a year, not like a ton, but definitely like it was relevant and it would happen like, typically in the winter, right? And a lot of people are like, no, like functional mushrooms, like you don't want to get sick, like just start taking functional mushrooms and like forget about it. Now with that said, it's like if you're not sleeping or like not drinking water, or like not eating, like you're like you may get sick, but like I sleep anywhere from like 6 to 7 hours a night, and I'm eating and sleep or drinking water. So I don't know. I'm not here to say, hey, mushrooms are going to solve all your problems, but I've
Yeah.
definitely heard that. And then as I've been down the journey, I've started to see that like, oh yeah, that's sort of starting to happen to me too.
Yeah, they definitely help your health overall.
Yeah. So just referencing back to your original question of like, does it conflict with Western medicine? Like, yes, like I would say my thoughts and beliefs and values are starting to align more with Eastern medicine, of like that there are natural and like herbal remedies, that have medicinal powers that can sort of help with your overall well-being.
Yeah, that whole topic I'm really interested in, but I know nothing about, is just because you'll hear stories like that every once in a while, or I'll see them on, I don't know, something specific, maybe like Vice or something like that, where they'll talk about some story. Someone in America couldn't get help. Doctors couldn't find out what it was that was making them sick. And then they go to some other part of the world. And it's just these like old traditional techniques that fix them and cure them. And it just really makes you think like, yeah, Western medicine is great for the most part, but it doesn't mean, yeah, it's not the only option.
Yeah, and have you ever heard of there's like a theory, or like I guess it's an effect that I've read about. It's called the Lindy effect.
Uh-uh.
Heard about this?
No.
So the basically like, and I forget like the origins of the word Lindy, but there are specific origins behind it. But basically what it means is that like anything that like, or like the longer that something has existed or been around, like the more that it's been proven, right? Because if something exists for a long time but it doesn't work, like it simply wouldn't exist.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
think like as an example, like yoga. Like a lot of people are like, oh, like does yoga work, or like meditation? Like meditation has been around for thousands of years, and there's a reason that like it still is widely practiced, is because there has to be some sort of value or benefit there, or people just wouldn't do it, and then it would die out over time. And so you look at some of these like traditional medicinal practices or like herbal practices, and that's how I'm starting to look at framing of like, okay, like, functional mushrooms in reality have been used for thousands of years in ancient, Chinese medicine. And there's a reason, like there's a reason people have continued to use them, where you look in Western medicine and, maybe every like 5-10 years, a lot of these like drugs or treatments will get displaced by like things that are better, or they'll realize that there are adverse side effects. And so the reality is like Eastern medicine has this like massive history compared to a lot of, Western medicine practices. So it's just something that I like try and look at of like, okay, how much am I going to believe something works or is fact versus is just sort of being tested in theory? And some, oftentimes I'll look at like, does the Lindy effect apply? Like, has this been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, or is this just like a really recent thing? And granted, right, like there will be recent developments that are going to be great, and it just
Mhm.
requires time to sort of stick around for a while. But it's just a cool framework to leverage and think through things.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds exciting, honestly. Because obviously those things are old in the other parts of the world, but over here, yeah, with Western medicine, like things like this are kind of, I don't know if you'd say new, but yeah, not really looked at maybe as closely so far.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because a lot of it is, seen, I think, by Westerners as like unproven, right? Because
Mhm.
like there haven't been, Western clinical studies. There haven't been
Yeah.
thousands of clinical studies done. The reality is like there are a lot of studies done just in different countries or parts of the world. And when you start to, take ourselves off of that pedestal that I think a lot of, American folks, or even folks just in the Western hemisphere, do, like you start to see that like, okay, there is a lot of thought going into this. And yeah, of course they have different standards, and you shouldn't trust everything you read and whatnot. But there are other things out there beyond what's going on here in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah. And have you received any pushback from other organizations at all yet? I know
I wouldn't say
you're
pushback. The one, like one of the big debates in our category, or earth and functional mushrooms in particularly, is like the sourcing and the quality, and that's really important. So I've chatted with people, and you're like, hey, like this is something I believe in, and they're like, well, I've tried that and it doesn't work. And the reality is that could also be the case. And so sourcing, right, and like sourcing these ingredients, you have to be careful. Like somebody can sell you what they think is functional mushrooms, and the reality is that like it's not really functional mushrooms, or they weren't like sourced or grown properly, where they don't have a lot of that, like, a lot of those phytonutrients that are really have a lot of those benefits. So that's just a disclaimer, I would say. So for example, you can grow a lot of these mushrooms, and then a lot of people will create the supplements actually out of what's referred to as myceliated grain, or like mycelium. So let's take another quick step back. So when you think about a mushroom, in comparison to, let's say, like an apple tree, a mushroom is comparable to the apple,
hmm
right? So it's just the fruiting body of the actual entire organism. Now the apple tree, or like the roots, that is what is essentially mycelium. So those are like the roots underground that are actually like, you know, collecting the nutrients and actually like growing the mushrooms and then popping them out.
Mhm.
So a lot of people or organizations will take the mycelium or these roots and then create the supplements out of those. And a lot of the science has been shown that like those really don't have a lot of these like phytonutrients or really, like the powerful compounds in them that really cause a lot of these great effects, but they're way cheaper to derive. So that's where I say, like, when you look at sourcing, it's like, oh, okay, I want to try lion's mane, which is one of these functional mushrooms really touted to have a lot of like, mental focus or creativity benefits or productivity benefits. And then people will try it and they're like, oh, it didn't work. And so, yes, like that's possible. Like it's also a supplement like others where like, stick with it for a couple of weeks and then report out. It isn't necessarily just going to work overnight, but, look at how it's being sourced or what exactly it's made of, right? Is it derived from the mushroom or is it derived from the mycelium? But there are a lot of people that kind of stand on both sides of the fences. I'm in the particular camp that thinks that deriving from the mushroom is really the way to go. So it just depends.
That's also interesting.
But it's like anything, right? Like if you buy a tomato, you can tell the difference between a really good tomato and just kind of like a shitty tomato that was, maybe not grown super well or grown with pesticides, et cetera. And so it's the exact same conversation where it's like, do you eat really fresh food that's like really well grown and cultivated, or is it just like shitty food created in a lab that, isn't as bioavailable and really isn't that as good for you?
And using that example, so the people who are taking the roots, using the example of the tomatoes, they would be looking to use the roots of the tomato plant as the same benefits as the actual tomato.
Potentially, I guess that's where the example like gets a little skewed, because I don't think you could like take the roots of a tomato plant and call it a tomato, but but yeah, I would say like that example would be more comparable to like growing a tomato in a lab versus like growing a tomato in like in an organic, field with like nutrient rich soil, right? Where it's like actually deriving a lot of these like nutrients and vitamins and it's like really delicious versus kind of this like pale like thing that's just being pumped out in a lab.
Yeah. Okay. And where do you get yours? Where's your sources?
Yeah. So we source from like, we're actually transitioning sourcing right now, but we source out of this company from Canada, and all of our functional mushroom extracts are from fruiting bodies or from actual mushrooms. They're organic. I also recently found out they're kosher, which doesn't surprise me. I think that's funny. And so we source from this company out of Canada that ends up actually, they like have contracts with a lot of farms, and so we're sourcing through them.
That's awesome. Is there any issues coming from Canada?
No, not yet, but I'm sure there will be, as the market continues to develop, like some of these supply chains for some of these mushrooms, like, aren't exactly sustainable. So that's another question and another like issue for people in my category and in industry to start thinking through of, like some mushrooms can grow incredibly rapidly. And like you can build farms around this that could scale with demand. But there's other mushrooms like, so chaga would be an example where chaga grows on trees and it's sort of this like slow growing mushroom where like there's only so much supply and only so fast that it can grow, where like you probably will get to a point where chaga is in high demand and like the supply won't be able to keep up, and people are going to innovate or people are going to cut corners, and that's where I think you really start to run into some potential issues.
Yeah, people doing it in a lab and maybe messing with the makeup of it or something, so it's not actually what they're saying it is.
Yeah, exactly. So who knows? Time will tell. And yeah, that's a broader issue that think about, but I'm not exactly tasked with solving today.
Yeah. And do you feel that this is an industry, a market that is just kind of budding and about to explode? Is that kind of the feel you get?
Yeah, I do. And that's what you're seeing from a lot of market reports and interest. And, I think just as more people get more access to like higher quality functional mushrooms and start to incorporate them into their lives, I think people will start to see that. Obviously a lot of the publicity and talk around legalizing like, psychedelics, I think supports, right? I think a lot of people will start to see that and they're like, oh, like psychedelics aren't this horrible thing. Like they actually have a lot of these like interesting medicinal qualities, which is really the reasoning behind the legalization. It's like there really has been no better treatment that has been like shown through clinical trials that has really shown just the awesome benefits against, PTSD, addiction, sort of, et cetera, even like mental diseases. So I think, people are starting to open their minds and realize that like, hey, there's a lot of different mushrooms out there and there could be a lot of really cool effects that they could have. And these could be really good for me.
Yeah. Are you versed in psychedelic mushrooms? Like the different, because it sounds like you're saying there's a bunch of different types of mushrooms that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of different like psychedelic mushrooms. I'm not super well versed in them. I just know some of the research and, I've definitely experimented myself and seen a lot of those benefits, particularly from like a mental health perspective and also like self-awareness perspective.
Yeah.
But I'm not like, I wouldn't call myself super well versed. So.
Yeah. I was just wondering what, the difference maybe of even those mushrooms from mushroom to mushroom would be, but yeah, because I'm not either. And it sounds like there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, there definitely are more than one. I'm not sure if a lot of the studies have just been using one type though or not. I'd have to look a little closer.
Yeah, because when you hear the term mushrooms, you just think, oh, that's like a thing. But it sounds like what you're saying, it's like a lot of things. There's a bunch of them.
So the reality of like, so a mushroom is actually more closely related to a human or an animal than it is a plant, right? A lot of people just think it's a plant. It's not a plant. And we've, scientists estimate that we've even like observed or discovered roughly only like 7% of all like mushrooms or fungi in the world. And in that, I think it's something crazy where there's like 250 times more different types of fungi in the world than there are plants.
Wow.
So there's just like this massive number of mushrooms, and like they really are very, understudied today comparatively to like plants or animals or other species. So I think the industry and the market as a whole will continue to develop, and different mushrooms will be found and all sorts of cool stuff. So even like like penicillin, right? A lot of people claim and think that like penicillin allowed the U.S. and others to win World War II because it really just allowed us to like essentially help injured people on the battlefield. And penicillin is actually grown from a fungi. And I think you'd be surprised, a lot of Western medicines and Western, how do I say, I guess we'll just, use the umbrella term medicine, are derived from fungi today. So, it's just a matter of time that like awareness grows around that and more, sort of more developments are made.
Yeah. Is there like a big push in the industry of people trying to go out maybe in the jungle or different parts of the world to find these new versions or these new unfound mushrooms?
I don't know. Maybe I know that as of recently, there's sort of this like ridiculous bubble forming around psychedelic companies.
Yeah.
Where like, all this money's flooding into them to try and develop certain, medicinal items as legalization, is sort of en route. But I'm not sure about the discovery. It could be cool. I know back in the day, like some of the like original pioneers of the industry were going out and they would try different mushrooms and they would like record. They'd be like, oh, this is kind of how it tasted or like how it made me feel or whatnot. And like people would die. So like there's these accounts, there's these cool accounts of like half written books.
Yeah.
And like somebody will be writing a book and like documenting different mushrooms, then they'll eat a deadly one and like die.
Just die.
So with that said, but I also like won't scare people. The amount of deadly mushrooms like known today is only, I think it's like under like 100, and there's, I don't know, like hundreds of thousands of species documented. Where so like it's such a small percentage of like actually deadly mushrooms, but
yeah,
it's like
obviously
crazy.
You guys aren't using any of those.
No, definitely not.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, do you hear a lot about microdosing?
Actually probably less than you'd think, but I've chatted with some people who are definitely into it, and it's interesting. It's never what you'd expect.
It's what?
It's never like who you'd expect. I was chatting with a friend's mom the other day, and she's like, "Yeah, I microdose once a week."
Yeah. I remember reading about it in college. Just to be completely open, I dabbled with psychedelics a few times in high school. Never mushrooms. I tried, but the plan kept not working out. But
Mhm.
I haven't done it for a long time now. But I remember reading about microdosing in college and just thinking it was really interesting. And it was a lot of Silicon Valley is what they were
Yeah.
talking about. So it was completely just, corporate America. It wasn't, these like uh, psychedelic hippies who were using it. It was people at offices trying to be more creative. And
Hmm.
so it was just really interesting. And I remember being at the time, I kind of forgot about it now. Like, how would you even, get a hold of this to do that? Or is there, or just the whole process of it? Because obviously they're taking such low amounts, you're not tripping or having a psychedelic experience or anything. But I remember reading a guy's article who would just, I think he drew every day. He started with like the same basic picture or something, and then he would just draw and whatever came to mind. And as time went on, he just got kind of more creative and more creative with his drawing. And
That's cool.
yeah, it's just really interesting. So I guess I have a little interest in that, but I've never.
Yeah. I haven't really dipped into that. I would consider it. I don't
Yeah,
know. I think it's interesting. But yeah, I haven't quite gotten there yet.
that could be one of your 30-day trials.
Maybe. Oh, that would be an interesting one. I
Yeah,
for sure would like to journal during that, I guess.
right. Exactly. I think it'd be
Yeah.
fun. I don't know. I'd be interested to see just how it actually does affect you, or if you feel it or not. And because a lot of the
Yeah.
things I was seeing is that you didn't personally, as the individual, notice. It's not like you felt any different, but it was just your mind was a little bit more creative, and it probably was having those kind of effects on your body. Like you're talking about with your stuff, where it's just making you healthier,
Yeah.
opening up little creative maybe pockets in your brain that otherwise aren't.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, if so, I have like a slight back. I got a minor in neuroscience in college and took some courses in high school through MIT. And if we want to just try and high level get sort of scientific of like what are psychedelics actually doing to you.
yeah.
So so in your brain and like the very center of your brain, you have this thing called the thalamus.
Hmm.
And essentially like any sort of like perception or observation signals that come in through any of your five senses, right? So think like taste, touch, feel, smell, sight,
Hmm.
go through the thalamus, and then the thalamus directs these like senses to like the specific areas in your brain that actually decodes them and like helps you understand and then like react.
Hmm.
So what happens like from a high level, and I don't know, this research like maybe slightly outdated. I was learned about this in college, is that when you take psychedelics, it almost confuses those signals. And so, you have very like standard channels that start to develop in your brain of like, oh, like you touch something and it like goes up to the thalamus, and like there's already this like deep ingrained channel where it's like, okay, then that goes right to like the touch center, and it's like, oh, okay, you just felt something on your finger. And instead it like kind of mixes the signals and just like sends shit everywhere. And so what it does to your brain is it actually like opens up almost like new pathways, and that's why it's like, oh, like I like could smell that touch. Like
Yeah.
you like couldn't really, but like your brain like will get a signal there where it's like, oh, that kind of like it's kind of like a smell, but like I touched something. And so it allows your brain to actually start like thinking and like perceiving things differently. So that's where a lot of like the creativity comes in with psychedelics, and like opening your brain to like new thought patterns and like new belief systems and like values, and actually being able to almost take like a fresh perspective on the world, where like over time it just develops these like really ingrained channels where it's like, okay, this is what I believe, this is what I see, this is what I feel. And then it sort of like kind of hits reset a little bit there for a second.
Yeah, that's so interesting and so cool at the same time. And it makes complete sense
Yeah.
why, because I actually wrote a paper my freshman year of college on PTSD, like a research paper. So it's been a while now, but I forget. But it was about treatment styles. There was two different types of treatment, but I remember reading a little bit about psychedelic treatment, and um, it was even less probably talked about then. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago now, but it makes sense that type of treatment would help those people, because I'm sure, yeah, they've had these experiences that are largely negative, and that's
Yeah.
that channel in their brain that keeps going back to, and then a little bit of maybe a psychedelic treatment kind of lets their brain go somewhere else.
Yeah, precisely, right. So like you would talk to them and you would ask them about a horrible experience, and immediately in their brain it's like, oh, this is horrible, like I'm closed down, or like I have this
Mhm.
adverse reaction. And instead it allows them to, yeah, like instead of going directly to this adverse reaction, like potentially think about it from a different point of view in a different frame, and like get past that just like horrible, memory or reaction or
Yeah.
perception.
Power of mushrooms, man.
Power mushrooms.
Seems pretty real. And again, from the outside, it seems pretty under maybe valued even, but understudied. And like
Yeah, it's definitely understudied.
it seems like it seems like the legalization of marijuana is kind of just going right into that too. Would you say that?
Yeah, it's definitely heading that way. That's the thought and the feeling on the market for sure. So yeah, that's for us, right? Like functional mushrooms, like I believe in the power there, and I think
Hmm.
the awareness will grow. There's a lot more awareness around psychedelics, but let's say one day psychedelics do get legalized. Like for us to be able to add like microdose amounts of psychedelics into our products, like how cool would that be?
That'd be so cool.
So it's like, all right, I'm gonna like have a microdose day, and like I'm just gonna have some granola and like for
Hmm.
cereal, and then I'm gonna have a day. Like
Yeah.
sounds like a plan. Count me in.
What is that was kind of a question I was going to ask. What is the long-term goal or maybe vision of your company here? And do you plan to incorporate psychedelics, obviously, if they become legalized in the
Yeah,
future?
definitely, right. And so for us, it's all about like this more of this broad stroking like health and wellness journey, right? So for me, it's like I've really found it's about these whole food ingredients and about
Mhm.
like functional mushrooms of like that can really support your journey of just living like a happy, healthy life. And so it's like how can you create products in the market where people can start to recognize that too, and start to really feel really good and feel better and healthier and happier
Yeah.
across their lives.
And would that be, the number one thing you'd kind of want people to know about functional mushrooms?
Yeah, I think
What
so.
this can
Yeah.
offer you?
Yeah, I strongly believe that they improve your life, specifically around like mood and
Mhm.
sleep and energy and just all the above. So I'm definitely a big believer in them. Yeah.
Yeah. And you felt all that yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I originally thought they were kind of this like witchcraft, and I went to a class at an apothecary, and it was on adaptogens and tonics. And we didn't quite get into this, but a lot of the functional mushrooms fall under this Eastern, medicine category referred to as adaptogens. And adaptogens basically are just substances that help your body react to stress.
Mm.
Um, and I thought it was like a sham.
Hmm.
And we get in and they serve us this tea, and I'm sitting there listening to it and kind of like, huh, this is like interesting. And then I had this like pretty renowned effect where like drinking a reishi tea, it's one of the functional mushrooms, and it's supposed to have this very like calming, like relaxing effect on your body. And like it felt like I had taken a muscle relaxant or something. I've never taken a muscle relaxant, but this is what
Yeah.
I'd imagine. And I had this almost like zen high. I was very just like calm, but like focused and like intent and just like very like just like content and
Mhm.
happy. And then I was like, what's in this tea? And then the teacher, like 10 minutes later, was like, yeah, like we served a reishi tea, and like it can often have like calming effects, typically for people who are also just like a bit more high strung, and I'm definitely just like every chaos all the time. So yeah, I was like, oh shit, what the fuck are these? Like these are real. It's like this. I was like, this is not witchcraft. It's like,
Yeah.
or if it is, like I'm in.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know, I'm like trying all these different supplements and really getting into it. So that was kind of what kickstarted my journey of like I had this completely adverse belief in them, and then I had this great experience.
So it really changed your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a powerful experience, I'm sure. Completely
Yeah, it was good.
from one
Yeah,
side of the fence to the other.
exactly. So I definitely am opinionated and hold opinions strongly, and until I don't, and then pretty
Yeah,
willing to be open minded and change my
that's great.
perception. So
That's great. I think we need more of that. Who is the one who got you into mushrooms? Did you just stumble upon this yourself one day and
yeah,
think this is something I want to do?
that story was it. Like when I moved to Seattle, I was like, what's weird out here that I've never done before? And I was like, oh, what's an apothecary? And I was like, what are adaptogens? Like this
Yeah.
sounds
What
weird. And
what is an apothecary? Because I'm not even sure.
yeah, they basically like those are the stores that like are going to sell a lot of like herbal remedies,
Okay.
like Eastern medicine type stuff, like things like crystals. They can go like across the spectrum. You know, it's a place where like you could go to like make your own lotion or like, you know, buy really like niche ingredients that are found around the world.
Definitely a place probably have mushrooms.
They do. That's where I was finding them. So
We're at 11 o'clock here, so let me know when you need to start wrapping up. But
yeah, yeah, probably like in the next 5 or so, if that's cool.
yeah, 100%, man.
Cool.
So where can people access your granola?
Yeah, so we're online on our own website. So, you know, our brand name is Forij, but it's Forij.
Mm-hmm.
So forij.co, forij.co. We're on Amazon. We're in some local Seattle stores. We're just entering Bristol Farms down in Southern California. We're going to be entering, you know, about 100 stores, more like co-ops and whatnot, along the East Coast and down in California and in the Pacific Northwest here in July, and, you know, talking with Sprouts and some other bigger retailers. So we're around. We're also onboarding on the Thrive Market, so, you know, should be accessible there soon as well. So yeah, we're growing, but, you know, definitely more available online than we are in store today.
Yeah, pretty easy to just get it on Amazon, you said?
Yeah, and, you know, like you can find us on our Instagram, same deal, forij.co, Forij.
Yeah.
Forage, that spelling is the phonetic spelling of the word forage. So a lot of people are initially maybe pronounce it forage or like foree,
Yeah.
but it's forage.
That's funny because I was looking at
Yeah.
myself like, what is this? How does he say it? And I was looking at your stories
Hmm.
and I was listening to how you were pronouncing it. No, it is just forage.
Yeah, just forage.
And I was also laughing at your you had a couple clips of it. It looked like you were trying to do a commercial or something or make a video for Forage, but you kept messing up.
Oh, yeah, it was for a pitch competition. I was I was doing a bunch of videos, and yeah, it
Yeah.
was pretty funny.
It just
Yeah,
reminded me of doing self tapes for acting, and that's exactly how it is.
sure. Yeah, dude. Yeah, I have a lot of respect for you and actors out there and actresses who are out there hustling doing self tapes.
It's funny. You get so frustrated. You mess up one little word, and it's like, fuck, start over.
Yeah,
10,
yeah.
10 more later, start over, 10 more later. But man, this is exciting. Thank you for coming on and just talking about this.
Oh yeah, man, it was nice chatting, dude. I'm glad we met over the internet, and maybe
Yeah,
one day we'll actually link up in person. I know, you know, my plan is to come down to LA at some point soon. It's definitely an important place for us. So
yeah, I bet. I'm sure you'd be really welcomed here.
yeah,
But yeah, man, let me know if you're ever down here
I
and
will for sure.
if we can get together. Maybe if COVID's not happening anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, dude. Well, yeah. Once we get the vaccine or something.
Things are opening up here. I don't know how it is up there, but things are
Yeah,
definitely opening.
similarly.
Yeah, moving that direction. So
So,
hopefully soon. But yeah, thank you again.
oh
Love
yeah,
talking
man.
about
Sounds
it.
good. It was nice chatting, and yeah, dude. We'll be in touch.
All right, have a good one, man.
Peace.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.